You are listening to to LBC, where I, James O'Brien, have just replaced Nick Ferrari in the studio. We'll listen to the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves' response now to Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget.
I will call the Chancellor of the Exchequer to move a provisional collection of taxes motion. Copies of the motion are being made available in the vote office. I now call the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to welcome the Right Honourable Gentleman to his place. Can I thank the Chancellor on his comprehensive demolition of the record of the last 12 years. Their record, their failure, their vicious circle of stagnation. The Chancellor has confirmed that the costs of the energy price cap will be funded by borrowing, leaving the eye-watering windfall profits of the energy giants untaxed. The oil and gas producers will be toasting the Chancellor in the boardrooms as we speak, while working people are left to pick up the bill. Borrowing higher than it needs to be, just as interest rates rise. And yet the Chancellor refuses to allow independent economic forecasts to be published, which would show the impact of this borrowing on our public finances, on growth and on inflation. It is a budget without figures, a menu without prices. Speaker, what has the Chancellor got to hide? This statement is an admission of 12 years of economic failure. And now here we are, one last throw of the dice, one last claim that these ministers will be different. For all the chopping and changing, all the chaos and confusion, there has been one person there throughout. The Prime Minister. She's been a minister for a decade and defended every single economic decision. So when the Prime Minister says she wants to break free from the past, what she really means to say is that she wants to break free from her own failed record. Because where have the last 12 years left us? Lower growth, lower investment, lower productivity, and today we learn that we have the lowest consumer confidence since records began. The only things that are going up are inflation, interest rates and bankers' bonuses. And borrowing. As the Tories become more and more detached from reality, millions of people, millions of our constituents, are lying awake at night, worried about how they're going to make ends meet. Labour won the argument that action on energy bills was necessary. But the question is, who pays? The energy producers who have profited so much from the rises in prices should make a contribution. But when the country asked who should fit the bill for their energy rescue package, the Conservatives responded, you, the British people. Instead of standing up for working people, the Conservatives chose to shield the gigantic windfall profits of the energy giants, leaving tens of billions of pounds on the table and pushing all of the costs onto government borrowing, to be paid for by current and future taxpayers. The Prime Minister and Chancellor have no regard for taxpayers' interests or for the concerns of working people. It's not just the Conservative Party is not working for ordinary families, it is actively working against them. Mr. Speaker, we have had 6 so-called plans for growth from the Conservatives since 2010. Here they are, Mr. Speaker, a litany of failure, every single one of them. Now, I do at least commend the Chancellor on having the ambition of achieving 2.5% growth a year, the last Labour government's rate of economic growth. But to achieve that sort of growth, and for that sort of growth to be sustainable, you need a credible plan. And the truth is that this government does not have one. The Prime Minister and Chancellor are like 2 desperate gamblers in a casino chasing a losing run. The argument peddled by the Chancellor today isn't a great new idea or a game changer, as the Minister said, as much as he'd like us to think so. What this plan adds up to is to keep corporation tax where it is today and take national insurance contributions back to where they were in March. Some new plan. And it's all based on an outdated ideology that says if we simply reward those who are already wealthy, the whole of society will benefit. They've decided to replace levelling up with trickle down. As President Biden said this week, he is sick and tired of trickle down economics. And he is right to be. It is discredited, it is inadequate, and it will not unleash the wave of investment that we need. Mr. Speaker, it is not just those on this side of the House who have these concerns. The Right Honourable Member for Surrey Heath described the Prime Minister's economic plans as taking a holiday from reality. The Right Honourable Member for Richmond, that was 2 Chancellors ago, was perhaps too honest with his party. He said, "We have tried having a low corporation tax as a means of getting business to invest, but that it has not worked." Now, the new Chancellor and the new Prime Minister used to agree with that. Indeed, they voted for it. Labour supported it too. Members opposite might have changed their minds, but we have not. Because the evidence shows that low rates of corporation tax are not the best way to boost investment and productivity. And the Tories' own record shows that. Britain has the lowest headline rate of corporation tax in the G7, but we also have the lowest rate of business investment in the G7. That's why Labour would do what businesses are actually asking for, using targeted investment allowances to boost productivity and growth, and scrapping outdated and unfair business rates that harm our high streets and small businesses, replacing them with a system that's fit for the 21st century. And what about their other policies? Let's take the so-called investment zones. Again, these are nothing new. Every time they were tried, all they have achieved was moving growth around the country, not creating it. The best way out of the high-tax, low-growth spiral that the Conservatives have created is to get the economy firing on all cylinders in all parts of the country. It's going to take much more than a stamp duty cut to get our country back on track, and home ownership back to the levels last seen under a Labour government. Now, these stamp duty changes have been tried before. Last time the government did it, a third of the people who benefited were buying a second home, a third home, or a buy-to-let property. Is that really the best use of taxpayers' money when borrowing and debt are already so high? And can the Chancellor confirm today how much of this stamp duty cut will go to those purchasing multiple properties? Instead of stamp duties going up and down like a yo-yo, we need to get building. We need to target support at first-time buyers and tackle the issue of homes being sold to overseas investors. The Chancellor has made clear who his priorities are today. Not a plan for growth, a plan to reward the already wealthy, a return to the trickle-down of the past, back to the future, not a brave new era. The Chancellor and Prime Minister proclaimed in Britannia Unchained that the British are amongst the worst idlers in the world. And to prove that they mean it, instead of supporting working people, this government is cutting their rights at work. Working people are the backbone of Britain and they should be respected, not sneered at. Labour will always stand up for their rights. Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor has in effect today admitted he has broken his own fiscal rules. This is now the 10th time that the Tories have broken their own fiscal rules. Something I'm sure that the Office for Budget Responsibility would have confirmed if they had been allowed to publish their forecasts today. Mr. Speaker, it is unprecedented to have a fiscal statement of this scale with no independent forecasts from the Office for Budget Responsibility. Never has a government borrowed so much and explained so little. Economic institutions matter. Yet this government has undermined the Bank of England, sacked the respected Permanent Secretary at the Treasury, and silenced the Office for Budget Responsibility. This is no way to build confidence. This is no way to build economic growth. Mr. Speaker, Labour believes in wealth creation. We will always support enterprise, creativity and hard work. We want British business to grow, to be successful and to contribute to our country's prosperity. What we don't believe, as the Chancellor and Prime Minister do, is that British workers are idlers. We understand that it is the workers who turn up every day to make a great product at a factory or deliver a great service in the store who generate growth. It is the teachers giving the young people the skills they need, the doctors and nurses keeping people well, the entrepreneur taking a personal risk to start a new business. These are the people who generate growth, and they all deserve to share in it too. Mr. Speaker, this statement is more than a clash of policies. It is a clash of ideas. Two different ideas about how our country prospers. If you are a pensioner worried about the cost of living, a working family see your mortgage rate going up, a small business whose costs are spiralling, the government's announcements today do little to reassure them. Bigger bonuses for bankers, huge profits for energy giants, shamelessly shielded by Downing Street, and all the while, ministers pile the crushing weight of all of these costs onto the backs of taxpayers. The value of sterling has fallen. We can see it, half his colleagues suspect it, and financial markets know it. The verdict is clear. When it comes to the economy, this Tory leadership do not know what they are doing. The Conservatives cannot solve the cost of living crisis. The Conservatives are the cost of living crisis, and our country cannot afford them anymore.
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was very interested to hear the Right Honourable Lady's defence, and I was very curiously affected when she said that Labour believes in wealth creation. That was the biggest fancy I've ever heard. You cannot grow, Mr. Speaker, the economy if you keep taxing families. You cannot grow the economy. You cannot grow the economy if you see business as the enemy. We have to reiterate very clearly to our friends on the opposite benches that you cannot tax your way to prosperity. You cannot help workers by increasing their taxes. And far from denigrating British workers, what our measures have done, is they are relieving burdens on our workers and our people by intervening on energy prices and also relieving the burden of taxation. We've got to unshackle the creative energies of this country, and that's what we're 100% focused on doing.
Committee Melstride.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome much in this statement. There is a great deal that will help millions of families and businesses.
This is Rishi Sunak's campaign manager, interestingly.
There is a vast void at the centre of the announcements that have been made this morning, and that is the lack of an independent OBR forecast. And at a time, Mr. Speaker, when the markets are getting twitchy about government bonds, when the currency is under pressure, now is the time for transparency and make it very clear that whatever tax cuts or otherwise there may be, they are done in a fiscally responsible manner. And I have to say to my right honourable friend that he should have come forward with an OBR forecast. And that we know as a committee, because of our correspondence with Richard Hughes, the head of the OBR, that the OBR was standing ready to come forward with just such a forecast. And we further know, because of that correspondence, that there is a forecast, a baseline forecast, that the Chancellor has at the moment and would have been on his desk when he first arrived in office. So could I now gently and respectfully ask him to release that forecast, to provide transparency to the House, to provide a calmness to the markets, and to do it without any further delay?
Thank you. I'd like to thank my right honourable friend, and I'd also like to gently and respectfully remind him that in the statement I committed in a very categorical way to the OBR coming up with a forecast before the end of the calendar year. It will be a full forecast, it won't be a baseline forecast, and it will fully score the measures outlined in this growth plan. And I'd be very happy to meet him in his committee at a time which is convenient.
SNP spokesperson Alison Thewlis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor comes here today, the 6th Chancellor in 7 years, asking us to believe that the things that he voted for and supported just a few months ago were all fine at the time, but need completely reversed now. A new era, but they've been in government for 12 years. He stretches credibility beyond breaking point, saying that tax cuts for the rich, whopping bonuses for the bankers and low corporation tax for companies will somehow refloat, magically, Britain's sinking economy. He has no evidence, and this is no plan for growth. It is budget measures with no OBR assessment, ducking scrutiny time and time again. It is a plan, Mr. Speaker, for recession, for debt on an unsustainable trajectory, and almost inevitable public sector cuts to come. Actively choosing to permanently cut taxes and spend eye-watering sums to patch up a failed energy market while inflation soars, interest rates are hiked and recession looms will not create growth, it will create economic chaos. Nothing he has said today will provide any reassurance and give hope to ordinary people, folks struggling to get by in broken Britain. Families unable to put food on the table and heat their homes, punished by the Tory benefit cap and the two-child limit. These policies are driving up child poverty, and the Chancellor should be scrapping them, not the bankers' bonus cap. Indebted households already struggling to pay their mortgages in debt. A stamp duty cut is not going to help, it's going to overheat that housing market even more. Mr. Speaker, disabled people and carers are terrified the electricity will run out. Pensioners are scared to turn on the heating. The energy price cap should not go up. It's already too high, and people must get more help now. Asylum seekers and people stuck on no recourse to public funds are forced to get by on a pittance, and there was nothing whatsoever for them from this Chancellor. Mr. Speaker, community organisations like Glasgow Central Mosque face additional energy bills of hundreds of thousands of pounds, which as a charity they just cannot afford. People depend on community organisations like the mosque, and they are being asked to be on the front line this winter. Even with the 6-month reprieve in energy prices, these bills will not go away. Would the Chancellor have the mosque close their elderly daycare service, or the counselling provision, the mother and toddler group, the poverty reduction work, or the vaccination centre that's been running in the community hall? These are very real choices communities are already having to make. The businesses I've been listening to over the past months are incredibly worried for the future. They were already facing severe pressure through supply chain costs, input costs, labour costs, COVID debts and Brexit woes before energy prices soared. Now they don't know how they will survive. 6 months will go by in a flash, and the question remains, what then? What then from the Chancellor? Companies can't wish away these bills. The eye-wateringly unaffordable contracts they are being forced to sign right now. What happens to those businesses who just miss the arbitrary cut-off? And what of the increase in standing charges, which we already know are disproportionately high in Scotland? Mr. Speaker, Scotland is an energy-rich country, but we don't have the power. Scotland's renewables sector is booming, but in off-gas grid rural Scotland, surrounded by the wind turbines generating clean green energy, people are having to spend an absolute fortune in heating oil. In Argyll and Bute, in Angus, the Highlands and Isles and across our rural communities, household fees increases of over 230% in the past 2 years alone. The UK Government's offer of £100 is nothing short of an insult as people turn to credit cards to fill up their fuel tanks. The Scottish Government is doing all in its power to support people through this crisis, strengthening the safety net by increasing the Scottish Child payment to £25 a week, doubling the Fuel Insecurity Fund to £20 million and freezing rents, because renters are also facing pressures. We have the highest rate of the real living wage in Scotland. We've invested in tackling fuel poverty and energy efficiency, but we could do so much more with more budget and more powers. At the back of the Blue Book today, still no carbon capture and storage for the north east of Scotland, a game changer for renewables in Scotland. Where is that in the Chancellor's plans? Nowhere again. We could have growth by investing in skills, in net zero and productivity. The Chancellor's plans will not do this. Mr. Speaker, people don't freeze to death in our Nordic neighbours, and people there are not living in one of the most unequal countries in the world, and it's only getting worse. This right-wing, Thatcher cosplaying shambles of a government is making choices that they will never feel the consequences of. Mr. Speaker, I beg of this Chancellor to listen to those on the edge, those who are desperately looking right now to him for a lifeline, but no one should have to beg for a decent standard of living. The people of Scotland see a Scottish Government doing their best to mitigate the worst, but stymied by the broken politics of this union and this economic madness we heard from the Chancellor today. Scotland is looking for a different path, Mr. Speaker. Scotland needs independence.
What Scotland doesn't need is reheated socialism from the SNP. She mentioned energy, and I'm always staggered when people in her party mention energy and they don't countenance nuclear power. Nuclear power is a great, clean form of energy. And while we speak about energy, she will know that we have indeed listened. We have implemented a limit to energy prices. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, who's no longer in her place, made the engagement within 2 days of taking office, and it's something which I'm very proud of, and we've also extended it to supporting businesses.
In fairness, the spokesman for the SNP was heard.
It's 21 minutes after 10. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where, unlike the BBC, I noticed, we felt it was important to hear what the SNP spokesperson on that, on the economy, on the Treasury, had to say. Some other contributions there that were not necessarily in the schedule. The chair of the Treasury Select Committee expressing fairly profound misgivings about the absence or the refusal by Kwasi Kwarteng to allow the Office of Budgetary Responsibility, which is, of course, an entirely independent authority, to share its forecasts of what the economy is likely to do in the near to middle future and what the announcements just made by Kwasi Kwarteng were likely to do to those forecasts. Make of his refusal, his failure, his reluctance to share that analysis what you will. Make also what you will of this. There are, I think, 529,000 people in this country who earn over £150,000 a year. All right? It's a very good chunk of change. It's a very healthy salary. Over £150,000 a year. A small number, I think it's 529,000 people. As far as I can tell, they just got a very, very early Christmas present, Theo Usherwood.
They did. That was the headline announcement from this mini-budget from Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng. So in effect, there was a additional rate of tax which kicked in, and everything you earned over £150,000, and that was in 45 pence in the pound. So everything you earn over that threshold, you'd pay 45 pence in the pound in tax.
629,000 people.
Chancellor
I
Kwasi Kwarteng didn't raise that threshold, so fewer people would be captured by that additional rate of tax. He simply abolished it. He got rid of it, and so now the highest rate of tax you can pay, which kicks in at £50,000, is 40 pence in the pound. So if you earn over £50,000, that you are the top rate. You're a top rate taxpayer. And the argument that Kwasi Kwarteng was making was that we need more people, more entrepreneurs at the very top who are willing to invest in this country, to come and set up their businesses in this country, create jobs in this country, and therefore, if they do so, and then you will see investment, private sector investment, and that will in turn create higher tax receipts by dint of the fact that there are more people out there working on higher paid jobs, then contributing to the Treasury that way.
It's very confusing though, because I mean, let's say you're on 400 grand a year.
Yes.
Then you've just made about 12.5 grand a year.
Yes.
clean money
Clean.
that you
Done.
would previously have paid in tax, and you will no longer pay in tax. And Kwasi Kwarteng's calculation is that someone on 400 grand a year is going to be transformed by an extra £12,500 a year after tax into becoming a different player in the economy, or suddenly discovering an entrepreneurial streak they didn't have before.
It might even be appealing to people who aren't even working in this country, or thinking about, or, working in New York or in Singapore or elsewhere, and they're looking at the UK and they're suddenly thinking, well, actually, if I was to ask my job to be transferred to the UK, I'd be better off than I'd otherwise would have been. So it's about not necessarily appealing to those who are already in this country working at the very top.
What sort of jobs could you do that with? Just city jobs, just financial
services jobs.
Nothing else.
Yeah, basically, and that's why he's also just scrapped.
And of course, the only job he's ever had is as a banker. So essentially, he has delivered a budget which is absolutely brilliant for people like him. And actually, I want to say something, and I want to say it clearly. People like me, I am quids in under this budget, and I bloody well shouldn't be, and I use that word advisedly. Not with the country and the state it's in at the moment. It's absolutely unbelievable that I come out of this budget considerably wealthier on an annual tax-based basis than I went into it. Absolutely unbelievable. If you're on universal credit, you just got slapped round the back of the head. If you're earning over £150,000 a year, you just got an early Christmas present. Riddle me that.
So what he also did in terms of the basic rate of tax, and I'm sure you'll have somebody from like Paul Johnson or somebody like that from the IFS on, is that he's brought forward that tax reduction. So the plan was to reduce the basic rate of tax from 20 pence in the pound to 19 pence in the pound from 2024 in time for the next election.
That also helps people.
It does also,
because it means everyone gets everyone who hits that threshold gets that bonus.
That's going to drop from next April, a year early. He also abolished stamp duty on every property below £250,000. So on properties between £125,000 and £250,000, you paid 1% stamp duty. He's got rid of that completely now, and so you go up to £250,000, you don't pay any stamp duty, and if you're a first-time buyer, you don't pay any stamp duty on a property below £435,000. And that's gone up from £300,000 previously. So changes, of course, to the stamp duty in order to keep the housing market going after, of course, what we saw interest rates going up yesterday by 0.5 percentage point. And the national insurance, finally, that's been scrapped, of course, to pay for the health and social care levy, which he said...
Just pause there, because I know we do this for a living. This was the levy introduced to fix social care.
Yes.
The increase in national insurance, which got a little bit hijacked by post-furlough, post-lockdown economics. Understandably, there was a need to juggle the cash.
37 billion.
But the idea was that we'll put an increase on national insurance, and that money will be ring-fenced and earmarked and clearly dedicated to hugely improving social care in this country and protecting people from the threat of losing their own home in order to pay for their own social care. I mean, how many Tories voted against that when it went through the House? What a completely unfair question.
Yeah,
but off the top of our heads, I would say none.
None.
Not even a kind of, a rebellious type, or even a complete numpty like John Redwood. No. They almost certainly all voted for it. And they campaigned on it, I think, or did it come in before the last election?
No, they campaigned. It came in. It was
a manifesto sort of pledge, probably.
Well, they campaigned.
This is the bit I don't get. They're now voting for the polar opposite of what they voted for yesterday. So, metaphorically speaking, and cheering it down with. Get rid of that thing that we introduced, invented, and voted for.
But what's interesting is they are continuing to pay for the health and social care levy, which amounts to around £37 billion. But they're going to pay for it not through tax,
but through borrowing.
But through borrowing now.
Which is what they always accuse Labour of doing. So again, they're introducing a policy that they've spent their entire political lives condemning.
So you'll remember that George Osborne and David Cameron, for the first 6.5 years of this current Conservative government that goes back, of course, all the way to 2010, although for the first 5 years it was in coalition with the Liberal Democrats, they kept on saying that Gordon Brown didn't fix the roof when the sun was shining. Gordon Brown and Tony Blair didn't manage the economy properly, and that's why we ended up with a budget deficit of around £165 billion. It was actually because of the financial crash, which was caused by the subprime housing market in America, and therefore you needed austerity to reduce public spending because you couldn't continue to borrow that amount of money. And it's a complete reversal of that orthodoxy where we are now going to borrow that amount of money in the hope that by the next election, because everybody is out there earning more, investing more in the economy, that tax receipts overall go up.
Is there a precedent for this? I'm thinking of
Not
the year I was born.
1972.
1972, and we know how well, some people know how that ended. We might get some authority. I just reference a couple of our colleagues. Ben Kentish points out it will now be very difficult for ministers to argue that giving doctors, teachers, nurses and police officers a bigger pay rise would be inflationary, while giving those earning £150,000 and more a huge income tax cut will not.
Yes, because you'll remember, of course, when trade unions have argued for pay rises, they've been told, well, actually, if you have wage increases right across the board, then that's only going to contribute towards higher inflation. Of course, the danger with all of these tax cuts is that by providing demand stimulus, so people are out there spending more, you only add to the inflationary pressures. Now, of course, that was it.
I hear you. And another colleague, Daniel Barnett, saying that he can't wait for Mr. James O.B., that's me, that is, to start eviscerating all this. Sorry, and he even gives it a little asterisk, popcorn asterisk. I don't know what to say at the moment. This never happens to me on the radio.
You've got another 2.5 hours.
I've got another
James.
2.5 hours of radio to... I don't want to use the verb fill, because that, I think, does a disservice both to the quality of our broadcast and the wisdom of our list. I have not got a clue what to say. Can you do memes on the radio? Can we do memes? Can we start? I mean, how do you even begin to unpick?
It is a conservative budget. It is, and I'm talking old school, libertarian conservative budget. I mean, it's extraordinary.
It is absolutely extraordinary. And the first takeaway before I start canvassing your opinions is this: if you earn over £150,000 a year, you just got a very early Christmas present, and the more you earn, the bigger the present. If you don't, you got butt kiss. Holly Harris is here with the headlines. 10:35 is the time. I wasn't exaggerating. I genuinely am lost for words for the first time in almost 2 decades of live broadcasting. Thankfully, there will be a phalanx of better qualified and calmer contributors queuing up to contribute to the programme, which can, of course, include you. 03456060973 is the number that you need. And one is imminent. I just want to share something with you first, if I can. It's actually, no, let's crack straight on. No, here it is. I don't know if you're familiar with Tim Montgomery. He was being very, very rude to our colleague Sangeeta Maiska recently. He still sort of gets treated as a respectable commentator on conservative matters, despite having been, I think, Ian Duncan Smith's chief of staff at one point and categorically wrong about everything from Brexit downwards. He has just tweeted publicly, a massive moment for the IEA London. They've been advocating these policies for years. They incubated Truss and Kwarteng during their early years as MPs. Britain is now their laboratory. Now, he's probably had a rush of blood to the head there, because they're not supposed to say this stuff out loud. They're not supposed to say this stuff in public. So there you have someone who describes himself, I think with pride, as a senior contributor to GB News, and who has had the ear of many Conservative leaders, even had a job under Boris Johnson briefly, admitting that whoever it is that secretly funds the so-called think tank, the IEA, whoever it is that pays their wages and sponsors their work, whoever those mysterious people are, because you'll remember they refuse to tell you, they refuse to tell me, they refuse to tell anybody who pays their wages. There you have a prominent Conservative cheerleader, I mean, I would say explaining or admitting or simply stating that they are now in charge. Not the people that work there, they're just empty vessels who do whatever it is they're paid to do. But the mysterious secret people who pay them have now occupied Downing Street. And it's not me being an excitable liberal. That's one of your go-to Conservative commentators. One of my go-to commentators, by contrast, knows exactly what he's talking about. Lionel Barber, a former editor of the Financial Times. Lionel, you'll forgive me for not having any zinging questions ready. I'm just going to invite you to shoot from the hip and respond in real time to what we've all just heard.
Well, it is extraordinary, and I'm a very calm individual too, but I was taken aback a little, James. This is a tax-cutting bonanza. It goes much further. It's far riskier than people were even saying before. You've gone through the numbers. You've seen what we expected, not raising corporation tax, national insurance. That's not the issue. The issue is top rate of tax going down 45 to 40, tax cuts increase the cost of borrowing. So I think the crucial thing is to look at two factors. Number one, the financial markets. How are they going to respond to this? We know what Mark Carney said, that Britain depends on the kindness of strangers, on foreign lenders having confidence in economic policy. So if they don't have confidence, sterling slides, that's what's happening, and interest rates go up. That brings me to my second point. The thing really to watch here, Bank of England. The Bank of England is supposed to be independent. They are slowly raising rates. If they don't have confidence in this package, you're going to see faster than expected interest rate rises, which will nullify the impact of the package, and you'll have a real war or a tug of war between the Bank of England and Treasury, something that's not happened in the 25 years since the Bank of England was given independence.
Where would you put your money, if you pardon the pun? What do you think is likely to happen? We get an early indication, but not a definitive one, of what the pound is likely to do against the dollar. It slipped further while Kwarteng was actually speaking, I think.
I really would look at long-term interest rates. That's the cost of borrowing. Remember that 1/4 of Britain's huge pile of debt is index linked. That means it's linked to inflation. So this could get very nasty. My view is that interest rates are going to go up faster.
Right.
Again, it's so important, James, and you didn't hear anything really from Kwasi Kwarteng this morning about what's happening in the outside world. If you saw this week, the Federal Reserve hiked by 0.75%, 75 basis points. So the idea that Britain is some kind of...
Well, we're struggling with the line, Lionel, unfortunately. We may see if we can. You've frozen mid sentence. We'll see if we can fix that in the meantime, because I do want to hear a little bit more about that. The idea there of markets and interest rates. I was about to ask what success would look like. I think it's very important to remember that we all want this gamble to succeed, but we need to be informed on the likelihood of it succeeding. And I don't even mean that politically. I mean that economically. Should we try once more with Lionel? Yes, I think we're back. So the interest rates are likely to be put up by the bank. You were talking about what's happening in the rest of the world in a way that Kwasi Kwarteng didn't, Lionel Barber.
Yes, sorry about the connection, James. First of all, Federal Reserve raised by 75 basis points and made it clear that they are going to continue their aggressive rate hikes. The European Central Bank is also raising rates, being a bit slower. So I think the Bank of England, again, won't be able to just act as if they'll be following what's going on in the outside world. And this is the real point here. So it goes back, you remember the phrase, Britannia Unchained?
Yes.
Well, Britannia is part of the rest of the world. It's not some kind of island independent force.
I used to think I was the only person that had read that book, Lionel, back in sort of 2015, 2016, when I would read from it on a regular basis and warn what was on the horizon. That's worked out well. Finally, the significance of that refusal to share independent costings, to share the Office of Budgetary Responsibilities forecast, which Mel Stride, the chair of the Treasury Select Committee, made clear were available. The head of the OBR had also made clear that they were available. It's odd, isn't it, that Kwarteng sought to claim that all independent observers were somehow on side with what he was saying, but the most important and relevant to government independent observer has been squeezed out of the picture.
Again, incredibly important, because if you're talking about whether financial markets have confidence in this government's policy, independent of the extraordinary borrowing, then that's the whole point of having an independent Office of Budget Responsibility, because it reinforces the credibility of your policy.
So we can speculate with a degree of confidence about what that forecast was likely to include if Kwasi Kwarteng is desperate to keep it from the eyes of the population. What happens now then? Sorry, I know I said that was my last question. So do big banks and fund managers, do they now start undertaking their own analysis and their own forecast before deciding what to do, which they would have done anyway, but they'd have done so against the backdrop of whatever the OBR had said. Oh, we've finally been defeated, but we got enough. We got enough to chew on from Lionel Barber, former editor, of course, of the Financial Times. So, obviously not as qualified to comment on these matters as your Uncle Keith's Facebook page, which is right now possibly cheering the fact that the Tories have brought in tax cuts that won't affect your Uncle Keith one jot, but will make people like me considerably better off than we were at 9 o'clock this morning. And I don't think that's fair, or right, or justifiable. But hey-ho, I'm a snowflake. Alex is in Edinburgh. Alex, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. It's just completely horrifying and awful, and it's financially illiterate. And I think in the end, this is going to make all of us poorer.
What's the gamble? Can you phrase it, put it into words? I can feel my vocabulary rebooting. I can feel my oratorical, whatever it is, rebooting. So I think I'm going to be all right until 1 o'clock. But can you put into words what the gamble is? Because they don't like the phrase trickle-down economics, but they have given a bunch of money to the people at the top of the economic pyramid, presumably in the hope that it will make its way downwards.
I don't even think it is a gamble. I think it's purely reckless. What's likely to happen now is sterling will devalue further. That will then automatically bake more inflation into the economy because it's going to make the price of petrol, diesel, natural gas, lots of stuff that we import more expensive. Consumer goods are already going to get even more expensive. It's just complete nonsense all round. And it's not inconceivable to believe that Britain is now going to be the Argentina of Europe in the 21st century. We are on a totally unsustainable path. There wasn't a mention of our trade deficit either.
No.
We import so much more than we export. And then he's just introduced a load of measures that aren't really going to benefit the economy in any way, but are going to trash our currency at the same time.
Well, we'll have to watch that very closely. It's not guaranteed, but it's a real fear.
I mean, what we really need at the moment is to cool inflation, and tax rises are a measure to cool inflation. He's done the total opposite. The stamp duty cut could also potentially see a further increase into house prices just at a time that mortgage costs are going to get more expensive.
And the last time they abolished stamp duty, as you say, the house prices just went up, really, so that what you would have paid in stamp duty went instead into the inflation of the price of the house you were buying.
Absolutely.
Oh,
I can't see a single positive in this.
Well, someone's going to have to. I mean that just in terms of the programme that we're making. I want to absolutely stress that if you have crunched the numbers as Lionel Barber has and as Alex have, and you've come up with different results, or you've got a more upbeat analysis, you are not just welcome on the programme, you're positively encouraged to call in on 0345 6060 973. What's your perspective, Alex? You don't have to tell me. I'm always interested by whether people are professionally engaged in these matters or whether it's just a sort of personal skin that's in the game.
I'm not professionally engaged, but I follow financial matters and the markets very closely and do investments and things. My wife is from Sweden, and I spent quite a lot of time comparing the two tax systems and two philosophies between the two countries, and it's very interesting, actually, because in Sweden, across the board, taxes are so much higher.
Yes.
But as a result, you have a country that even after COVID has a GDP to government debt ratio of 40%, whilst ours is over 100%. Yeah. Their GDP per capita is about 25% higher than ours. There are no tuition fees for people.
And the gap between the top and the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder is minuscule compared to what it is here.
Absolutely. And now we've decided to go in the opposite direction even more than we already were at the beginning.
We have, yeah. We've pressed down the accelerator on inequality, on the bizarre prayer that it would somehow get shared out more, when, as I explained earlier in the week, the more money you give to people who've already got the most money, the more they're going to save. The more money you give to people who've got the least money, the more they're going to spend. I think that's fairly obvious. Alex, thank you. Thank you, everybody, ringing in. Let's take some more calls after this. Here's one, Idiot's Corner. Are you going to spend the rest of the day talking the UK economy down? That's from Loz, who is exactly who people like Liz Truss somehow appeal to, and Kwasi Kwarteng. So Kwasi Kwarteng's delivered, unless Loz is against appearances, contrary to appearances, on about £1 million a year working in the city. which seems unlikely. I don't want to read too much into a single tweet, but it seems highly unlikely. Unless he is in that category, then he is a lemming. He is a turkey voting for Christmas. His scarf, his Tory scarf, is tied so tightly around his neck that he's now trying to criticise me, who's just been given a huge sum of money by Kwasi Kwarteng, quite possibly more I've saved in tax in the last hour than Loz will earn in a year. And he thinks that I'm his enemy and Kwasi Kwarteng is on his side when I say that's absolutely grossly unfair. Well done, mate. Seriously, just stay away from scissors. 10:51 is the time. A couple of you kind enough to remind me that I did predict this in my first book, How to Be Right. If you don't actually sit upon these secretly funded think tanks that desperately strain every sinew to influence government policy, media conversations, the whole world of politics, then you will end up in a place where whoever it is that secretly funds these so-called think tanks masquerading, lobby groups really masquerading as think tanks, whoever it is that secretly funds them will end up with their hands on the wheel. And here is one of the most ridiculous but prominent Conservative commentators in the country, Tim Montgomery, tweeting 40 minutes ago, a massive moment for the Institute of Economic Affairs, which is obviously a very comical name, but some people have fallen for it for years. They've been advocating these policies for years. They incubated Truss and Kwarteng during their early years as MPs. Britain is now their laboratory. I'm not going to lie to you. When I've warned you about this over the years, there have been moments where I've thought, have I gone a bit tinfoil hat on this with all the Tufton Street stuff? Have I gone a little? And then I meet these people. I don't meet them, God forbid. If I do, I have to address them in the most Anglo-Saxon of terms. But I watch them and I see them and I deal with 2 years of them trying to shut me down and silence me while claiming that they're on the side of free speech or they're on the side of freedom or liberty. And I'm not exaggerating, and it wasn't a conspiracy theory. Whoever it is that funds these think tanks, the Taxpayers Alliance, the Institute of Economic Affairs, what's the other one? What's the CP?
There's the CPS.
Yeah, that fella's got a column in the Rupert Murdoch newspaper, hasn't he? So they've set up
You've got the Adam Smith Institute.
Got the Adam Smith Institute as well. All of these outfits. Why would you give them millions of pounds if you were the kind of fella that's going to benefit from a tax cut for the richest people in the country while everybody else gets nothing? And there you have it. You know, they're admitting it. Theo, what brings you back?
Well, I just was to bring you reaction from those various think tanks.
Oh, yeah.
So I've been on the phone to the Institute for Economic Affairs.
So-called think tanks.
I've been on the phone to the IEA, and I spoke to somebody there, and they said they're fairly pleased with the mini-budget, and they describe it as a reformist move. The CPS has...
Let me just clarify there for you that if you're currently on £30,000 a year, you are now £174 better off. You've just received, I think this would be due to the national insurance change, you've just received about 0.58% increase in your post-tax income.
So the Centre
if you're on £200,000 a year, you've just made just shy of £3,000. That's a 1.43%, so almost triple increase in percentage terms. So don't look at the numbers, look at the percentages. You've had 3 times as much back in percentage terms if you're on 200 grand a year than you've got if you're 30 grand a year. But don't forget, old Loz in Idiot's Corner this morning suggesting that we shouldn't be talking down the economy. Carry on, Theo.
Right, so we've got the Centre for Policy Studies, and it's just tweeted just a few wins and then that tick emoji above
because
another
it's all
tweet.
a game. It's important to remember that. I mean, when this is clearly a time for emojis with the cost of living crisis on the horizon.
Above another tweet by somebody else, which, again, not to blow their trumpet, they said, but this mini-budget cancelled the corporation tax, pro-business agenda, stamp duty.
These are the people that took us out of the largest free trade area in the history of humanity.
Reversing national insurance. Now, you mentioned, what was the other one? Adam Smith Institute.
Yeah.
So we've got Daniel Pryor, head of research. He said the government is rightly prioritising growth after years of stagnation, and today's measures are a welcome first step to getting the British economy back on track again.
Have any of them, I know you've been checking up on, have any of them revealed who funds them yet?
Not to me.
Oh, okay, carry on.
Okay, then we have the Taxpayers Alliance. John O'Connell, he's the chief executive of the Taxpayers Alliance. He's emailed me, well, I'm sure he's emailed lots of people actually. He says taxpayers will be delighted with a budget that eases the burden on their bottom lines and promises a growth game changer. With cuts to income tax and stamp duty, the cancellation of the corporation tax and national insurance rises, and the freeze to alcohol duties, households and businesses will welcome the most taxpayer-friendly budget in recent memory.
But it's not. It's a high earner friendly budget in recent memory. It's not friendly to taxpayers. It's friendly to the highest earners in the country, the people who get to pay corporation tax by dint of keeping what's left over after corporation tax has been paid.
I forgot the most important line, I think, from the Taxpayers Alliance.
Oh yes.
Daniel Pryor concludes, but to end the cost of the government crisis, the Treasury now needs to get serious on spending and ensure borrowing doesn't weigh down on generations to come.
The pound dropped to a fresh 37-year low against the dollar on Thursday as UK Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, this is yesterday of course, unveiled the government's growth plan for the UK economy. I think it's falling further as we speak, but we'll keep an eye on that for you. If you're American, in America, listening to this programme, Happy Christmas! Because not only does your dollar now go further than it's gone in 4 decades, but you can do the tax-free shopping as well.
And it extends to alcohol.
So you won't even be paying VAT or duty on all the booze that you buy. So this is a great budget for wealthy American tourists, an absolutely shocking budget for struggling British taxpayers. I'm running out of words again. Terry's in Bristol. Terry, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
I'm a
Terry.
bit nervous.
It's only me. Don't worry. I'm not going to take out my frustrations on you, Terry. That would be wholly inappropriate.
I just wanted to tell you my story. So we're going to benefit from the announcements today because we're about to buy a house.
Okay, good.
Well, I'm not really that happy about it. I'd rather pay and have a health service that works.
Well, you were going to buy the house anyway, weren't you? So you're not in the category of people who now go, oh, look at that, we can buy a house now.
Exactly. So this is a bit of a windfall for us. But my daughter, she's got additional needs. She's been on the waiting list since January 2022 to see a specialist paediatrician. We got told at the time it's going to be a 2-year waiting list. But in the last few months, her behaviour and her needs just accelerated. And we applied to be recategorised.
Right.
I got a letter yesterday to say that she's now been categorised as red, which means she's among the highest needs in our area. But just to read, there is still a waiting list for children who are prioritised to red. Currently, this is 18 months.
I'm not unfamiliar with what red can entail and what it can mean. So much love and sympathy for you. And it, you know, I'm not going to be glib. There was nothing in that budget addressing the concerns that you have. Not a single syllable.
No. And what's almost more infuriating is these tax cuts means higher borrowing, I guess. So not only is she suffering, she's also going to have to pay for it when she's older.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that they prioritise themselves, that Kwasi Kwarteng prioritises fellow bankers over people like you and people like your daughter. I'm just sorry, all right?
Thank you, James. Sorry, I can't say anything more.
No, nor can I. Nor can I. That's it. I'm just sorry. Because that's what happens when you let these people take the wheel, when you let them take the reins, when you treat them like honest brokers or fair contributors. Brexit was the warning. Brexit was the canary down the coal mine. Andrea Leadsom, held up as a equal and opposite authority to Pascal Lamy, the former Director General of the World Trade Organisation. I was forced to do that on the BBC, to treat Andrea Leadsom like she knew what she was talking about when the bloke who used to run the World Trade Organisation was telling her she didn't. And then you get the fella from the Taxpayers Alliance coming in, or the fella from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Oh, here's someone from the Adam Smith Institute. Well, it's all over this radio station. It's everywhere. They don't tell you who pays their wages. They infiltrate government. They're now admitting that they've got their hands on the wheel, and they're still not telling you in whose interests they work. 3 minutes after 11 is the time. Brexit wasn't a warning, was it? It was a rehearsal. So here we are, this budget which could have been written either sort of in the fetid corridors of Tufton Street, where these secretly funded ghouls and vampires ply their dismal trade while refusing to tell anybody who actually pays their wages, in whose interests it is that they actually seek to influence government and politics. So there it is. Ian Dunt, as ever, makes a great point. You can hear the relief in Labour's voice. It's not just the fact that they've been handed the next election, although I suspect they have. It's the return to the classic Tory archetype, which they know how to fight. We will talk about the politics of it a little later, I think, but that's a really good point, actually. This is the politics of mill owners and master sweeps. This is a fiscal statement or a mini budget, whatever you prefer, that is notable at the first instance for 3 things. The first thing is that even in percentage terms, it rewards the richest people in society much, much more than everybody else. So that argument about, well, of course, the richest are going to benefit most from a tax cut because they pay the most tax. That holds true insofar as you're looking at the total saved. So here is a tax cut right across the board. Whoever is paying the most tax is going to get the biggest payback, right? You get that. But if you focus a tax cut on the people who've got the most money, then they, in percentage terms, get more than everybody else does. So this budget, incontrovertibly, hands money back to the richest people in society. I almost need somebody to seek to justify that position. I think we had a fellow in Acton who tried to do it earlier in the week on the grounds that either trickle-down economics didn't exist or that it does actually work. Those are the sort of twin positions being taken by the axis of idiocy, represented by these think tanks and the Spectator magazine and the Daily Telegraph and the rest of it. The idea is that if you give more money back to people like me, that will somehow improve your economic situation, right? So obviously I would love to believe that. I would love that. I'm at risk of sounding like Kevin Keegan at this point, talking about Liverpool losing. I'd love it. I would love it. If you could actually persuade me that by handing me thousands of pounds today, Kwasi Kwarteng, who hasn't given you anything, is actually really helping you, not me. If you can do that, 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Because what I need you to understand, wherever we were on Brexit, however cross you are with me about being right about other stuff, just think about this. The calculation is, if you're worrying about your heating, if you are on an average income, if you're looking at the cost of living, you're already thinking that we may not have a Sunday roast. It's reported in the newspapers today. You're not one of those mythical benefits claimants who is actually living the life of Riley. You are honest, decent. You've had your head turned a bit in recent years, perhaps, by some of the lies punted by the likes of Farage and his mates. You've been conditioned at times to feel a little bit threatened about foreigners moving into the area or coming into the country. Whatever it is that you and I may have disagreed about in the past, just have a little think about this. If you have anything like economic concern at the moment, if you are in any way worried about what is on the horizon, Kwasi Kwarteng's calculation is that by giving me thousands of pounds, he's really helping you. If you are in that situation, if you are somebody who is facing economic difficulty, worrying about your financial situation, and you've just got very little of Kwasi Kwarteng in percentage terms or in actual financial terms, you've got your national insurance cut removed, which means that social care is back where it was a few years ago. It was Manchester United, sorry, not Liverpool. I do apologise. I'm quite excitable at the moment, but honestly, lads, if that's what you're going to pick me up on a morning like this, then frankly, I don't know why I bother. So if you honestly think that by giving me thousands of pounds, Kwasi Kwarteng is somehow helping you, give me a ring and talk me through it. 0345 6060 973, because I feel the planet's aligning a bit this morning. I've already told you that I occasionally worried that my obsession with what these secretly funded lobby groups masquerading as think tanks were doing to British politics may have been a little bit conspiratorial. I'm never going to get a clearer vindication than we've just had in the House of Commons. It's as if these fiscal statements were written by the kind of ghouls who refuse to tell you who pays their wages. But the other bit of it, of course, the other planet, if you like, that is aligning is the footballification one. How many times on this programme have you heard me talk about footballification? The idea that people will cheer their team regardless of what is happening on the pitch. And we'll refer back to our friend in Idiot's Corner, who is now talking about people talking down the economy, even as Kwasi Kwarteng gives me thousands of pounds and gives him nothing. I mean, this is the day that if the scales don't fall from your eyes, they never will. There's a compelling argument to be made that apart from the bankers and the hedge fund managers and the investment funds, the people who and the American tourists, the people who benefit most from Kwasi Kwarteng's budget, Kwasi Kwarteng's ideology, are homeowners with no mortgage because interest rates are going up. So, I mean, the idea that you can win an election with the support only of idiots like Loz and wealthy pensioners who've already paid off their mortgages is remarkable. And I can't see the calculation. This is the weirdest thing about this lesson I've been on, this journey I've been on over the last few years, is that apart from the epic enrichment of the already richest, there is no plan. There is no ideology. Kwasi Kwarteng might believe it, but it's like believing in Santa Claus or unicorns. Except, of course, one of those things exists. It's like believing in unicorns. It's like believing in fairies. He might genuinely believe that by giving me thousands of pounds, he helps you. He might have had to believe it. It might be almost religious. But it's bonkers. It's bogus. It's incredible what's happening to this country in real time. Brexit was the mother of all alarm bells. And people thought it was a heavenly choir. People still bend the knee to Brexit, even as it picks their pockets. You listen to a government claim to be obsessed with growth while still doing a lap of honour for the achievement of pulling the entire country out of the biggest free trade area in the history of humanity. You give a single fig about growth. You're straight back into the single market. By tea time, not by Christmas, not by 2025. If you give a monkeys about growth, truly, you're straight back into the single market. But they can't do that. What are they doing instead? Oh, well, we are abolishing the cap on bankers' bonuses in order to attract people from overseas to come and work here. Going overseas to work? That sounds like fun. You mean like in a form of freedom of movement? I'll have a bit of that. No, you won't, mate. We've abolished yours. And we're still boasting about it. Here's Jacob Rees-Mogg to tell you why it's a great idea. But that point there, that idea that they are now so contemptuous of you, they think you are so pathetic that they're going to give me money, Mr. Woke Man, James O. Brexit, is getting thousands of pounds off these people while you don't know how you're going to pay your electricity bills, and they want you to believe that by giving me this money, they're actually helping you. Oh, it's the politics of envy. Oh, he's a champagne socialist. I've got the money. Thousands of pounds better off at 12 minutes after 11 today than I was at 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. Don't waste 10pence telling me to give it to charity or volunteer. I want a better and a fairer taxation system. And today we got the opposite. And you're still, perhaps, cheering for it, are you? Yeah, it's quite right. It's great that I don't know how I'm going to pay my electricity bills, and that arse on the radio has just been given thousands of pounds by the people I voted for and he didn't. Go on, riddle me that, guys. Come on, help me out. You voted for this. He's just given me thousands of pounds. You don't know how you're going to pay your bill next month. 0345 60 973. Give me a ring. Wave your little scarf around. Wave your little Brexit scarf, your little Tory scarf, your little free market scarf as you face financial oblivion and I'm getting cheques showered on me by Kwasi Kwarteng's fiscal statement. Talk me through why that's right, why that's fair, because I don't think it is, and I'm winning. He has created a budget designed entirely to further enrich the richest people in society. I don't even know how they're going to dress it up. I don't even know how the Daily Mail is going to deal with this. 629,000 people in this country currently earn over 150 grand a year. And he's decided that they're the ones that need the most help. We are the ones that really need the money at the moment. Let's crunch these numbers, lads, and find out how we can give people earning over £150,000 a year a serious chunk of change. Oh, and people on universal credit, let's try to make their lives harder at the same time. That's where the class war kicks in. And the challenge for the Labour Party is to somehow persuade people that they are a hell of a lot closer to the universal credit constituency than they are to the 150 grand a year constituency. Solve that riddle, Keir Starmer, and you will be in power for a generation, because people don't like it. No, God, no. Universal, no, not me. I'm on the side of the 150 grand a year plus people. How much do you earn? £40,000. But you're on the side of the super rich? Yeah, I'm a Tory, aren't I? Yeah, hey, striver, not a skiver. That fella over there on universal budget's working 2 jobs. He's working 38 hours a week. Yeah, but, I don't know, Brexit or something? Fish. No. This is what happens. And it's almost comforting, in the weirdest sense, to have the doubt removed, to have the reality enforced, to have them say it out loud. Whether it's that weasel explaining how the IEA are now in charge, or whether it is Kwasi Kwarteng not even pretending to give a about you while giving me money, giving all his mates in the city even more money, giving the £629,000 people in this country who earn over 150 grand a year a bonus, and giving everybody else a biscuit. Oh, man. 18 minutes after 11 is the time. I say this quite a lot, but rarely do I mean it as much as I mean it today. God, tell me I'm wrong. 0345 60 60973, or at least explain to me why giving me thousands of pounds and giving people who can't pay their energy bills next to nothing today, in the context of the mini budget, the fiscal statement, is actually a stroke of genius. It is actually a brilliant piece of politics. 19 after 11 is the time. Philip is in Bristol. Philip, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Great to speak to you. Just wish it was on more positive terms.
Yes.
I'm a mortgage advisor, and I'm pretty terrified for my customers who right now are facing really, really difficult choices. I think if rates are going to shoot up...
Interest rates.
Yes. So the interest rates and obviously the lenders' rates on the back of that.
Yeah.
People are going to be facing massive increases. Say you've been on a fixed rate, and that's coming up now. You're going to have a huge shock in what you're going to have to pay moving to new rates.
How much of it would be ameliorated? I mean, actually, you're talking about people staying in the same house, so stamp duty's not going to touch the sides for them, is it?
Stamp duty, it's going to have little impact. You're a first-time buyer, you're probably not going to be paying it in the first place, so that's not going to really make any difference, and it's not going to affect anything. The only thing it's going to affect is the solicitors' wait times on mortgages, because they're going to have more work to do, and people are going to have to wait longer, and in the meantime, rates go up. It's a mess. And touching to the other point of, cash in the pockets of people earning over 150 grand. If that was me, I'd just save the money. I'm not going to spend it. I'm probably used to a lifestyle at 150 grand. What's 3 grand extra? Just save it. It's not going to trickle down.
Might spend it on a holiday. That means it'll trickle down in another country.
Exactly. But then you have to stay in the queues for Brexit.
Yeah.
I'm
What's the gamble,
I take no
Phil?
responsibility.
What's the gamble? What does winning look like? Because that's the bit that we may struggle to identify together today. Because this, the programme is a bit self-selecting sometimes. I'd love people to have a go at telling me what the gamble is, but they deny that trickle-down economics exists now. A Spectator has a whole article about it. So it doesn't exist, but they've given lots of money to the people with the most money because that's going to benefit everybody. I don't know what's happening anymore.
Well, all right. The gamble is, which I see is it's not going to work. But you give money to the people at the top end. They're going to spend it. There's going to be prosperity. There's going to be growth. The tax yield increases. You can spend that on infrastructure. Spending can increase. Inflation will decrease. Rates come down. That's the utopia.
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen. I'll tell you now. I say people pocket that money. They'll invest it maybe into their stocks and shares because your stock market's going to fall. Buy some stocks, and they'll just get richer off the back of it. But it's not going to trickle down. I'm not going to spend it in the shops for it to trickle down into the shop workers' pockets.
I don't see how it can. I wish I could. I mean, you know, I'm not a victim of footballification. I don't have a scarf tied around my neck so tightly I'm never going to be able to get it off again. An awful lot of people who lean towards the left discovered that over the last few years. There are circumstances in which you'll still vote for your favoured party, but not with a kind of a sense of massive commitment or something like that. So I would love to believe that this might work. I would love to believe that by giving me a lot of money, they're going to help people who haven't got enough money. But I just
if it works, it'll be a masterstroke,
wouldn't it?
But I can tell you, if I had spare cash, I'd put a bet on to say it's not.
It's Tony Barber, I think, the last Chancellor to try this. Anthony Barber, Conservative Chancellor of the Exchequer from about 70 to 74, who I am told by better qualified people than me did something very similar to this. And you remember where that left us. Philip, thank you. Dan's in Chesterfield. Dan, what's going on?
Hi, James. First-time caller.
Welcome, mate.
So I thought I'd give you a heads up on a story from sort of the background that I come from.
Thank you.
I'm essentially a courier, and I drive for. Am I allowed to say the name?
I'd rather you didn't, just because I don't know where you're going next. But I know what your sort of circumstance. Are you on a 0-hour contract? Do you have to pay for your own van? Do you have to come?
I am.
Yeah, I'm familiar. Go on.
So when I'm listening to you this morning, listening to the budget, we've not had a holiday in 3 or 4 years, and I'm listening to the budget, and all I can see this budget is essentially a free holiday for those that are at the top of the bracket. And who's to say that they're going to spend this money within this country? They may go book a holiday abroad, a nice villa, and how does that trickle down to the people at the bottom of the ladder? I think it's just really unfair.
I'm entertaining the possibility that we are all missing something, right? I have to. I mean, you need to have some sort of optimism, however desperate it may be. So it's not just that we're going to go out and spend it, and therefore whatever it is you're delivering to... I mean, it doesn't really matter how much I buy. You're not going to get a pay rise, are you? You're just going to have more.
Not.
You're just going to. I mean, I suppose because there's only a finite number of deliveries you can do in a day.
Exactly. Yesterday I started work at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
And last night I finished at 11 p.m. So I took my daughters to school, and I didn't even say goodnight to them.
I'm sorry.
Yet I've still not got a penny to rub together. It's madness.
And the idea is if I buy more with the money he's given me, that would somehow help you. But it can't possibly help you because you're already running on fumes.
Exactly. It's madness.
You know what I mean when I say I'm desperately scrabbling around for something that doesn't sound as bleak. I
just really hope that there are some good people out there who are on the top of the top bracket wage earners that will help it trickle down to the bottom. I sincerely hope it does work.
How? I mean, unless you're giving your money to charity or food banks, and a lot of us already do that, how do you actually get it to infiltrate, to filtrate through the economy? Also, I don't want to live in a country that relies upon the charity of people like me to keep people fed. I want it to be a system of government. I want it to be a responsibility of the state.
I think the government that we've got in is very self-serving.
You're not going to win any prizes for that one, Dan.
No, not at all.
Except maybe the Statement of the Bleeding Obvious Award.
Absolutely.
It shocks me, actually. I thought I was unshockable, but when he announced that cut in the top rate, if I'd had tea in my mouth, I'd have spluttered it all over the desk, I think.
Absolutely.
Mate, take care. Thank you for that. It's a timely reminder of what it looks like at the bit where the money is supposed to be trickling down to. How does that work? You're working... I mean, Rees-Mogg wants to get rid of the working time directive. Dan's already working more hours a day than he should be doing. But the nature of that piecemeal work, that delivery work, that couriering is, as we've established on the programme. Again, I wrote about it in How to Be Right, actually. This idea that you can somehow find wiggle room for people who are already absolutely up against it. So how does that help? How does giving me money help him? 034 560 60973. Because if you can't answer that, you've been conned. Whenever it was, 2016, when you went for Brexit, 2019, when you went for Johnson. This. I mean, I probably didn't vote for Liz Truss unless you're a Conservative Party member. But unless you can tell me how giving me a ton of money helps Dan, then we really are all in it together. Mike's on the Wirral. Mike, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Yeah, I am a Conservative voter normally.
Still, even today. Good God, man. Go on.
But I have to say, I am left scratching my head with this one as well. I cannot, and I echo the sentiment that a lot of your callers have already made, is that, you cannot, we need to be helping people at the bottom and middle-aged earners, and we're not doing that. We're giving the super rich a real let-off. The issue I have is that is I probably vote not really for what's in my pocket, but for sentiment, and sentiment's the wrong word, but other issues that affect politics, but I am struggling with the fact that if I put a cross against the Tories at the next election,
you're complicit in this.
I am, yeah, and I don't want to be, because
I don't want to talk in code, and I'm not in the mood today.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll understand for one of my greatest hits calls. But what do you mean when you say other things?
So, I'm not an unintelligent bloke, I like to think. I'm in the Royal Navy, been in the Royal Navy 33 years, and I've seen and done all sorts of stuff on behalf of the country. And I am, I suppose, triggered is probably a right word to say, by things that I see in the mainstream. So things like the immigration thing with boats of unfettered immigration, people coming across and things like that, the cost that is increasingly costing us as a country.
But the people you vote for have been in power for 12 years.
100%. Yeah.
So how can that be something that makes you lean towards voting for them?
Because I think that there is 12, a great sympathy.
I'm just going to say, whatever you say now, I'm just going to say 12 years, aren't I?
I know. And you've got me.
I know.
There are certain things that I can't get away from, but I also think that the sympathies and some of the empathies that come from the opposition,
yes,
whilst I agree with a lot of what they have to say, I think that might exacerbate and make that problem worse, and that's why I vote as Conservative. So I don't vote.
We've got a huge labour shortage in this country now.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that some people still want to come here could quite easily, in a sane country, be turned into something positive, something to be proud of. I respect your honesty, and I'm grateful to you for it. But
I think I look at Leicester and what's happened recently in Leicester, and I think
they're
that
British people, mate. And why is what's happening in Leicester any different to what happens in Glasgow when Celtic and Rangers are playing?
Yeah, yes. And
I could force you to answer that, don't you? Why is it any different to the EDL turning up in Luton?
Because we're adding to it's a problem that is getting better. It's getting bigger, I think.
It's not. Unfortunately, the British social... I thought this was going to happen. That's why I said I really didn't want to do it. The British Social Attitudes survey that came out yesterday shows that the public concerns about immigration have gone off a cliff since Brexit. Do you know why, Mike?
Go ahead.
Front pages, mate. People whispering in your ear about how awful it all is. And that you've clearly replaced that with social media accounts that are persuading you that the events in Leicester are somehow a consequence of immigration rather than a consequence of religion. Because if it's a consequence of religion, then Northern Ireland is Leicester, and that's full of white people. When you don't have a problem with that.
I do have a problem with that, but
it's not what you raised. It's not what you brought up.
Well, I think we're not conflating issues, but what I think
we're not. We're talking about exactly the same thing, but the one that bothers you is the one where the people biting chunks out of each other are brown. And what I point out is that white people do that too. So it's not really a political position in any conventional sense, is it? It's a racial one, mate.
Well, I think that what we're doing is we're compounding a problem that's already there.
Right.
We could go around and around the houses.
Well, and then I say 12 years.
Yeah, and I would say...
So I don't like the other lot because of this stuff that's happening now after the lot I do like have been in charge for 12 years. It's just bonkers, Mike.
It could be, but if I voted for the other lot and the other lot were worse and made it even worse, where are we then? So it's almost like I need the benefit of hindsight.
No, it's almost like they've done a job on you. And I sense from your tone and from some of the words that you use that you're just about ready to realise it.
I'm certainly not blithely walking into a booth and voting for Conservatives.
But however bad it is, the fear that the other lot will be worse will propel you into that booth. I don't know what word you want to use, but blithely sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll judge it at the time. She's got 2 years to see where we go with it.
Yeah,
so.
And we've seen how she started. So we can all agree that we hope it gets better soon. In fact, it's possibly time to start quoting D. Ream again in the context of British politics. Mike, take care. Thank you. I do respect your honesty, but I don't respect some of the opinions that I think were bubbling away under the surface there for the reasons that I hope I managed to articulate in a fair and frank fashion. Holly Harris is here now with your headlines. 11:36 is the time. I wonder how many people will be just sort of disappearing below the waterline because of the economic difficulties, in part inflicted upon them by 12 years of Tory rule, while still shouting about immigration. I really do, and I don't get perhaps as angry about that attitude as I used to, because it's contempt for the con men, compassion for the conned. Stick me in front of somebody who's responsible for spreading these provocations and propagandas, and I'm afraid it's no more Mr. Nice Guy. But the people who've fallen for it and continue to fall for it, sorry. I'll never be able to treat them with the contempt that I reserve for the party leaders and the columnists and the pundits that have inflicted it upon this nation. Speaking of percentages again, a graduate earning 50 grand a year will now pay a higher marginal tax rate than someone on 150 grand a year. So, the only way you can get away with policies like this is by having an uneducated population, it could be argued. And here it is. So you're a graduate. By the time you've had your student loans taken into account, your tax rate is 51%. If you're on 150 grand a year, your tax rate is 42%. 37 minutes after 11 is the time. Kathy's in Plymouth. Kathy, what would you like to say?
I'd like to say that when we had the last stamp duty holiday, and this is just about stamp duty, everyone, the whole world and its grandmother, came down to Devon and Cornwall and perhaps even Wales and so on, and bought up holiday homes, which they then put up as Airbnbs or rental properties in the market instead of, selling those homes that were over, say, 300,000, so they wouldn't have stamp duty anyway.
So how has that affect? What's going to change as a consequence of what's been announced today? Forgive me, this is more your field of expertise than mine.
Well, all the lower band properties on the market, which is 300, it now goes up to 450.
30, yeah.
They're all going to be sold up again by people who are speculating on property in various counties.
Because only the first-time buyers get the stamp duty holiday all the way up to 430.
Right. Okay. I'm so sorry.
No, that's all right. I mean, you put me in a slightly tricky situation. I'm no Martin Lewis. I usually expect my callers to educate me, Kathy, but I think I think on this one that the first-time buyers get a bigger break on stamp duty than everybody else does. So right. there may be something there to possibly be mildly warm about. Of course, it presumes that some locals down in Plymouth are going to have the wherewithal to raise a deposit and get a mortgage on 430 grand, even as interest rates head north. But I don't think that concern about second homes is relevant to what's happened today. All right.
Those with more money can buy more anyway.
Yes, but that's what stamp duty cuts do. It helps people who can afford to buy homes buy and sell more homes, even if they only keep one home. I get sort of trolled quite a lot by some of the strangest people in public life. There's a bloke called Christian May who used to edit City AM newspaper when it was pro-Brexit, would you believe? Someone actually working in the Square Mile, albeit as an alleged journalist, who didn't understand something I said the other day about the fact that the stamp duty cuts helps rich people buy more houses. Not helps them buy like 20 houses, but they're going to move around more as a consequence of a stamp duty cut. That's the plan anyway, but how does that help people who can't afford to get on the housing ladder? But if you think his political analysis is funny, you should check out his haircut. Faraz is in Denham. Faraz, what would you like to say?
Yes, good morning, James. Well, first of all, I always fear the idea of having to ring you and debate an issue. So that's my opening statement.
I don't know if I'm in the mood for debating. If you're going to put a warm gloss on this, I'm going to let it wash over me like a jacuzzi, okay?
Like a jacuzzi. A bubbling jacuzzi. Okay, well,
bubbling jacuzzi.
So I'm trying to answer your exam question about, well, what is it we're going to get out of the proposals announced this morning? And I think I'm looking at it from a different perspective in that, they're having to think in the context of our economy, maintaining business, keeping employment at an all-time low and maintaining that rather than seeing that skew up and then having to deal with the challenges that high unemployment will inevitably then bring. And so I think what they're trying to do in many ways is move that levelling up agenda, that big policy campaign that we've heard in recent months, to helping sustain business and business growth. And I think that is a laudable aim in so many ways, which is forgotten about when we start looking at the details of income tax and all those elements that are being announced.
So this is helpful. So you're steering the spotlight from the individual to the institution, from the employee to the employer, as it were.
Indeed.
Okay,
and
so let's look at it
how
then.
we can sustain our economy.
Yes.
Which for me then has a broader benefit. And so I come from the property side, and I was just hearing your call about the stamp duty, and that I remember in the Gordon Brown era, that was a fillip or a tool that he used in his armoury in 2008 to help stabilise the housing market. And of course, the planning, relaxation of planning rules that were also touted today. Of course, we keep on hearing about planning changes year after year after year with 14 housing ministers going through DLUC. However, again, really important to then see that happen in practice, because if we can build homes, there's a chain supply that provides.
Well, let me unpick that then. Let me unpick that a bit, because as I understand it, if I was in property, I actually benefit from restricted supply. I don't gain from it, and so
there is something about that.
So the rhetoric of lifting planning restrictions means that theoretically more houses are going to be built. But as a developer with finite resources, I'd rather build a smaller number of houses for a much higher profit than a bigger number of houses for a smaller profit. So how is the lifting of planning restrictions going to play into that fact?
Yes, and I think that's one way of looking at it, which is saying developers will constrain supply. Well, of course, developers.
But it's the only way. Forgive me. It's the only way of looking at it. Otherwise, developers would be building a lot more houses now on the land that's already got planning permission, and we know that they're not.
Well, yes and no. And there is a capacity issue as much as
yes and yes, mate. I mean, here is a massive space with planning permission. Here is a property company not building houses on it. It's not a yes and no. It's yes and yes.
Well,
so how does lifting planning restrictions help?
Developers are not the only ones, of course, directly providing homes in the marketplace. There are registered providers which provide directly social homes as well. There are build-to-rent providers.
There's nothing in the budget about them.
No, but it's all about property and planning and relaxation. So it's not about specific type builders.
Are you really trying to tell me that Kwasi Kwarteng's announcements today were designed to free up more homes in the social housing sector?
Well, what I'm trying to say,
because if you are, Faraz, we're going to have to get out of the jacuzzi.
Well, no, we're on the hot level at the moment, and the prime element of it.
Because even he wouldn't try that one, pal.
Is the strategic point that I want to come back to.
Go on.
What the government is looking to try and do, and there are laudable aims in this, is looking at how the levelling up agenda, if I'm going to call it that, in its transposition, is now looking at maintaining business and business growth, whether it's in the property sector or even other sectors. And I think we have to remind ourselves that if we go in our economy, which has got huge headwinds coming for us, if we can't keep people gainfully employed, we go into a spiral of real decline. And I think we have to recognise, it's not an easy decision, for sure.
No, I mean, you do keep circling this point that it's been done to protect jobs, but I mean, it hasn't really, has it? It's been done to provide a bigger slice of the profit to the people that own the companies. Corporation tax. Me, if I ran a big business, paying less corporation tax doesn't have any bearing at all upon my employees' terms and conditions. It just means I get a bigger car.
Again, there's a point about a broader sense of keeping our economy going, James.
No, I'm listening to you. I'm not. This is affectionate laughter, not condescending laughter, because I'm giving you fairly specific examples, and you're giving me quite a lot of words.
Well, I'm giving you words where I think I'm.
Well,
trying
tell
to
me how
think-
it helps then. So here's me. I've got 100 employees. I'm paying them as little as I can get away with. I keep all the profits that are left over after I've been paying corporation tax. They've reduced corporation tax. I now keep even more. How's that good for my drivers?
And this is why I fear the conversation with you, James, because you're driving me into the extremities of what you and I both know is not true.
How does that help my drivers? I'm keeping more money than I did last year. How does that help my staff?
Okay. So coming back one stage, if we are able to keep our sectors moving, and I'm going to talk about property, if we are able to keep our house building industry delivering and building homes for people from all spectrums of society, right?
Oh, yeah.
If we are able to
cost you a lot more to borrow now, of course.
If we are, well, again, I'm trying to answer the first question.
No, you're not. The first question is, how does it help my drivers?
Well, of course, there are jobs that need to be done to help deliver those homes. There are jobs that then subsequently need to happen to service
So
those
no
places.
one's suggesting that you're going to improve the terms and conditions of my workforce. You're just saying that if we don't enrich the owners more, then the whole business might go bust. And that's what we're selling to the... Mate, that's exactly what you've just said.
Well, if that's what I said, then it's been misconstrued.
Okay. Well, forgive me for misconstruing. We've got to keep the business in. What are the immediate benefits for the workforce? Well, they'll still have a job, and the boss will have more money.
I'm trying to, and I knew this was always going to be a
It wasn't. I was in the jacuzzi for at least 3 minutes.
This was always going to be challenging. But what I was trying to do was, trying to ascertain the Chancellor's strategy with the Prime Minister, which is around thinking about retaining our economy and our business.
And then finally, just to shrug off the last of the soap suds, why has he given me thousands of pounds?
Why has he given you thousands of pounds? And that's a question that you would have to ask the Chancellor.
Oh, okay. I thought you were here to explain his thinking.
Of course, that level of detail is a more specific.
It's the simplest question of all. Why on earth has he given me thousands of pounds this morning? And you, I sense, as well, Faraz.
Well, we can't all be tainted with the same brush there, James. But what I would say is,
you don't have to say anything. I think you were probably best when you just said, "I've got no idea, James." It sounds absolutely indefensible to me, but I'll still be voting for it.
Well.
That's it.
Really
I'm getting out now. I need to get a towel. All right?
No.
Stay safe. No, seriously. I'm 3 minutes late for the break. It was fun. 11:51 is the time. Theo Usherwood is here. Was it all a dream, Theo? Has it all been a horrible dream?
I want to bring you up to date with reaction from the Conservative benches, nervousness about the announcement from the Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, particularly around the tax cuts and what it will do to inflation. But before I do that, I just take you back to the 31st of August. Rishi Sunak, in the final leadership debate, was asked about why he had not joined Liz Truss in saying that he wanted to cut taxes immediately. And this was his response.
But it comes down to borrowing. It comes down to the markets having confidence that the trajectory of our public finances is one that they have confidence in, right? That we're not constantly just going to be borrowing money that we have no hope of paying back. That is a pretty standard tenet of what anyone who's investing in the UK and buying our debt would like to see. And that's why having a credible plan is important. As I said, that's what the Conservative Party's always stood for, and it's what it will stand for under my leadership.
So a very clear dividing line with Liz Truss. He's not prepared just to bring forward unfunded tax cuts that would have to be funded through borrowing. He would hold back, and then once with the public finances were in a better position, he would bring forward a tax cut. And the tax cut he would have brought forward was on the basic rate of income tax in 2024. John Glenn, who worked for Rishi Sunak as City Minister for 4 years, an experienced hand, has just stood up in the Commons and said this.
But the final point I would like to make is, in an era of grave uncertainty around inflation, there is a clear concern in the markets around the irreconcilable realities of monetary tightening at the same time as fiscal loosening. And I would welcome the Chancellor's observations and reassurance to the markets at this time.
Could hear the nervous laughter. Now, of course, The pound has fallen 1.4%, more than 1.4% against the dollar. It's now down at 1.11 the last time I looked, just before I walked into the studio. What John Glenn is saying is that we're seeing interest rates go up. That's the monetary tightening versus the fiscal loosening with the tax cuts. And how can the markets have confidence if we're having unfunded tax cuts? The other problem, of course, is that with interest rates going up yesterday, if there's the stamp duty cut, but that's going to simply be eroded if interest rates continue to go up because of inflation, and you end up paying higher mortgage costs. And that was a point made by the former Attorney General, Jeremy Wright.
But would my right honourable friend agree that growth is dependent on confidence? Confidence of businesses, but also confidence of households who spend on the products and services those businesses create? And would you also agree that that confidence will evaporate if people's costs on their mortgage increase further than the benefits that they gain from tax reductions? And will he do all he can to make sure that doesn't happen?
Now, James, if I was to ask you a question as to whether the Chancellor has a backup plan, what do you think your answer would be?
No.
No, it doesn't have a backup plan.
Correct.
They're going for growth. That's what his spokesman just said.
Going for growth.
This is the only game in town. Growth is the only game in town.
And how do we know whether it's working or not?
Well, we'll know when we see the reaction of the Bank of England. And what was interesting about what Kwasi Kwarteng had to say in terms of the Bank of England's independence being sacrosanct, and people started looking at each other in the House of Commons when he said it, was, of course, will the Bank of England simply respond by putting up interest rates if we have high inflation?
Yes. Who knows? That's the warning, that's the fear. Thank you, Theo. We'll see you again, I think, shortly. We're supposed to talk about fracking in the final hour, which I should have brought up with the last caller, shouldn't I? Because these lifting of planning restrictions have probably got more to do with fracking than they have to do with house building, although we shall no doubt see. I think it was time for a nice cold shower anyway by the end of that conversation. I'm lucky to have Francis Coppola on now. You will know Francis as the author of the Coppola Comment Finance and Economics blog, and also as a contributor to the Financial Times. I'm going to give you permission, Francis, to treat me like an idiot. I'm sure you'll find it very difficult, and it will involve great leaps and feats of imagination, but pretend I know nothing about anything and tell me what we would be looking at immediately to see how Kwasi Kwarteng's announcements are going down and what we will see when we look at those things.
OK, well, the first thing we've seen is a pretty massive sell-off in the pound. So the pound has plummeted in its international value. And the second thing we've seen...
Hang on, why would people be doing that? What does that tell us about the markets? Is that the correct word to use? How the market's response to Kwasi?
Basically saying they don't like our currency anymore because they think it's going to inflate.
Right. That's not good, is it?
No.
How bad is it?
It's pretty bad because not only do they not want to hold our currency anymore because they think it's going to inflate, they also aren't too keen on holding our government's debt because they think our government's going to struggle to pay it back. And so for that reason, they are also selling off gilts and the yields on them, which is kind of the opposite of the price. The price is falling, yes. The yield is rising, and that means government's borrowing costs are going through the roof.
And we know that the figure of 60 billion was bandied around today to pay for the energy bailouts, albeit that it's a postponement of payment for taxpayers or a redirection of funds. It's not a windfall tax on the energy firms because she ruled that out quite early on. So that means the money that the government needs to borrow to do all the things that it's planning to do is going to cost them and therefore us a heck of a lot more than it would have done before they announced what they were going to do.
Exactly right, yeah. And I think I should point out that the message I'm getting from the markets is it's not the energy bailout that's bothering them. They're seeing that as a short-term fix.
Well, it's a genuine emergency, isn't it?
A genuine emergency. Yes. They're not having a problem with that. What they're having a problem with is the swathe of unfunded tax cuts that are supposed to kickstart growth when there's no real evidence that they do so. And if it doesn't work, then these things will be unsustainable over the longer term.
So this is probably what the Office of Budgetary Responsibility would have said if Kwasi Kwarteng had allowed them to say what they exist to say in the context of statements like today's. But instead, the markets have done their own number crunching and their own analysis, and they have concluded that, well, to read a headline on Bloomberg UK from a few moments ago, Truss's economic plan sends UK markets into meltdown.
Yeah, that's essentially it. That in the absence of the OBR doing this, the IFS had a go at it yesterday, and they were come out with their statement later, which I imagine will be along similar lines to the markets, really. But as ever, the markets got there first and said, we don't like the currency because it's going to inflate. We don't like the gilts because the government's going to be borrowing a huge amount of money, far more than we expected. And we basically don't like this very much at all.
So apart from secretly funded lobby groups masquerading as think tanks, who we tend not to pay lip service to on this programme, although the minute they reveal who funds them, we'll be more than happy to give them a seat at the table, where might I go for a more upbeat analysis of what Kwasi Kwarteng has just announced?
I am quite struggling to find one, I have to say. I am not seeing anybody being very positive about this except for Tory party supporters. And as you say...
Who were also cheering the polar opposite policy 6 months ago.
Well, exactly. I mean, I was quite amused by Kwasi Kwarteng standing up and saying this is a new era. And of course, the Labour benches fell about laughing. The Tories have been in power for 12 years. And in that time, we have swung from austerity to fix the deficit and bring down debt to levelling up, lots of investment in infrastructure to bring up growth in the regions, to now unfunded tax cuts for the rich to do trickle-down economics. They're not exactly being consistent.
Do you think they believe that this will have I mean, you have to believe that they believe that this will work, don't you? The alternative is too bleak and cynical. I mean, it's just like we've got 2 more years in power. Let's enrich as many of our mates as we possibly can, as much as we humanly...
Well, if I was being completely cynical,
yes.
This does actually remind me a little of Osborne in the run-up to the couple of years before the 2015 election, when he was doing various bits of jiggery-pokery with the fiscal finances, supporting the housing market and so forth, in order to create an economic boom in time for the next election. And if I was being completely cynical, I would say that these kind of tax cuts tend to bring about short-term growth.
Okay.
And then there's a bit like a sugar high, and then there's a crash later, which just might happen just in time for the next election. The question is, the problem is, though, that it might also generate extremely high inflation, and it won't deal with problems like the crisis in the NHS and so forth, and people might care more about that than they do about a short-term economic boom.
Thank you, Francis Coppola. And may I compliment you on so successfully treating me like a complete idiot. I've rarely felt more seen. Thank you. It's coming up. Just gone 12 noon. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. 4 minutes after 12 is the time. Panic over, I think, don't you? I didn't run out of things to say. I was genuinely concerned as we listened to that fiscal statement, that mini budget, that I just couldn't quite believe it. I couldn't quite get my head around it, to be honest with you, but we've done okay. I think I have, as you know, if you're kind enough to listen to this programme on a regular basis, I have many failings and foibles and frailties. Keith, stop it. Stop shaking your head. I do. I truly do. For example, I'm constantly straining to see the best in people, even when they may well be undeserving of such kindness and generosity. And also, I am a very glass half full sort of person, in that I often think to myself, it can't be that bad, can it? So over the years, when I've described to you the vampiric nature of these despicable lobby groups masquerading as think tanks and refusing to disclose who funds them, I've always thought, they can't be that bad, can it? You're sounding a bit tinfoil hatty, old boy.